welcome back. It is Back Talk Live, special edition out here outside at Katichi. We're very grateful to Katichi for allowing us to be here. We're also grateful to have a fantastic guest with us tonight. Parks White is the district attorney for the Northern Circuit of the 10th Judicial Administrative District of the state of Georgia, and there he is right there. Welcome back, Parks.
Thank you very much for having me.
How's it been going for you? You enjoying your new job?
I'm loving it. We hit the ground running back in January, and we've been just taking this thing full bore, working as hard as we can to try to bring down the backlog across the circuit, streamlining the process, working hard to make sure the cases come in from the warrant stage and get indicted faster. We get them arraigned faster, we get them to trial faster, and we resolve these cases rather than letting them languish. But so far, we've managed to bring the backlog down, even while taking on new cases by over 12%. We've added new technology to the office that allows us to be more efficient. We've gone through and done a systematic evaluation of areas which we can spend less money and still have better operating capability in a lot of areas. For example, we've moved from AT&T to Elberton Net in Elberton for our internet service, which is much cheaper, and yet it's a faster transmission rate for internet service.
Wow.
We moved to a different phone line in Hart County that's taken the cost of long distance from $1.60 a minute down to 9 cents a minute. So we're doing everything we can to really try to make sure we tighten our belts and cut costs, but also work as hard as we can to get this backlog behind us while still making sure that we're representing the state in a way that keeps the public safe.
You had said when you were running for office, when you were on the last time, you had said that you would probably try to tack some hides on the wall early to encourage other people to, instead of waiting around hoping the statute of limitations would run out, they would go ahead and plea bargain. Have you noticed any of that yet?
We have. In fact, one of the first cases that came up to the point of trial was a notorious drug dealer here in Hart County, and I'm not going to refer to his name. It was in the paper, but he had 6 prior felony convictions. He had 2 pending drug cases: one possession of cocaine with intent to distribute, one sale of cocaine. They were both from 2010, and he had not resolved those cases, not entered into any sort of plea, and just been out on bond the entire time. So I filed a recidivist notice against him, which is under the Official Code of Georgia, Section 1710(7)A and C, which would require the court to impose the maximum sentence for him, and then whatever sentence the court imposed in confinement, he would have to serve every day without parole. And the defense attorney I told him initially, you need to plead him now, or I'm going to file this notice, and I'm not going to waive it. He didn't plead him. So I filed the notice, said no deals, let's go to trial. The day before trial, he filed a motion to suppress, alleging alleging that there were problems with the search warrant, which I didn't believe there were, and the judge ruled in my favor. That night, as we were getting ready for trial at about 10 o'clock, the defense attorney asked me for my best offer in the case. And I finally said, I'll tell you what, I'll plead your client guilty to possession of cocaine with intent to distribute, and if he pleads guilty, I'll recommend a life sentence. And he pled him guilty the next day, rather than go to trial. So that's the kind of a life sentence. Now, for drugs, that means he'll technically be eligible for parole in 7 years. It's not a guarantee, but he'll be eligible for parole. But he will be on parole for the rest of his life. And if he just gotten like a 15-year sentence for drugs, which seems like a long time, he would have been out within like 3 years. So this is a substantial sentence, and it sends a message to the community, a message to drug dealers and to those who deal in crime, that we're coming after you. That in the Northern Circuit, justice is coming.
So this guy, the best deal he could get for his guy was life?
It was life, and he thanked me for it.
Well, at least I guess that was better than death.
Now, you had a case, we were talking about before we came on the air, a case that was settled today, or whatever, I don't know how you say it, concluded today.
Right.
Tell the audience that it's very interesting. I think most people are going to remember the incident, the crime.
Well, the last time I was on the show, someone actually called in about this, and it was a friend of theirs who was killed by a drunk driver last year. And the incident occurred on April 16th, and the case came to trial this week, Monday, in Franklin County. The defendant's name was James Thomas Dixon. Mr. Dixon had at least 5 prior DUI cases and DUI drug cases that were never prosecuted to completion by the former administration. One of them was dismissed 1 month prior to the day of this incident. Mr. Dixon had gotten another DUI drug case 2 months before this incident in February of 2012. Then and he had a litany of DUIs throughout his history, and only one conviction dating back to 1988. All the rest were just arrests. In this case, on the day of the incident, Mr. Dixon was operating a 1992 Buick LeSabre and driving north on Highway 17 while under the influence of methadone, which is a synthetic opioid, alprazolam, which is a benzodiazepine, it's also called Xanax, a tranquilizer, diazepam, which is also called Valium, nordiazepam, which is an active metabolite of diazepam, and alcohol. And he crossed the center line for no apparent reason, and he struck a Chevy Silverado driven by Julie Powell of Reedsville, whose passenger was her husband, Bobby Bland. They were bringing a trailer back from North Carolina where they had delivered a load of onions. The force of that impact, which is primarily on the passenger side, front passenger side of both vehicles, caused the vehicle being driven by Mr. Dixon to raise up into the air and turn. And as it did so, white Chevy Silverado driven by Joey Hart was coming in the right lane of that double lane on 17 South. And Mr. Hart's vehicle struck the bumper of Mr. Dixon's vehicle, and the bumper was shorn off and passed through the passenger compartment of Mr. Joey Hart's vehicle, killing him. It crushed part of his skull. It caused his vehicle to careen off the roadway, and there were tire marks across Mr. Hart's vehicle from Mr. Dixon's vehicle. It careened off the road to the front and went off into a ditch, flipping over, and he was killed instantly. Bobby Bland he was 77 at the time, was seriously injured, and he was transported to the hospital via emergency airlift. He had he had a skull fracture and broken ribs, and he died from internal hemorrhage in the brain. Mr. Dixon survived.
Now, Dixon is
he's the accused. He's the
Yeah,
driver.
he's
He's
the
the
DUI
person with all the prior DUIs. He was life-flighted from the scene with a broken leg and other injuries to Greenville Memorial Hospital, where he had an hour and a half after the incident occurred a blood alcohol concentration of 0.083, which means he would have had a blood alcohol concentration of at least 0.1 at the time of the incident, along with this myriad of other drugs. The Georgia State Patrol worked with the South Carolina authorities to obtain a search warrant for his blood, but it took some time to get that search warrant. And this accident occurred at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Remember, he had all these substances in his system at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's at 10 o'clock at night that they actually was served the search warrant on him and get his blood. And even at that time at night, he still had methadone, diazepam, nordiazepam, and alprazolam in his blood. He also had THC metabolites in his urine. So this guy was just a floating human landmine dropped on our roads. And unfortunately, he ended up taking the lives of 2 people and seriously injuring a third. Miss Powell lost her spleen as a result of the accident, and she also had serious injuries.
And what was the defense?
The defense was, it wasn't my fault. All the witnesses, there was an independent witness who saw the whole thing happen from behind Miss Powell's vehicle, that saw Mr. Dixon swerve into the oncoming lane of traffic, striking the vehicles, and his testimony completely was exactly as the reconstruction experts from the Georgia State Patrol, the specialized collision and reconstruction team, came out and put the scene, back together, essentially through an investigation. And their conclusions were just that he'd crossed the center line and impacted the vehicle, Miss Powell, resulting in the impact of the vehicle driven by Mr. Hart. His defense was, the white vehicle came at me and the trailer was going wild, and I jerked the wheel in order to avoid it. None of which corroborated. Oh, and the best part was when he testified at trial that after the wreck, he was screaming in pain, and he noticed a bottle of Xanax next to him, so he reached over and took one, and then he opened up the glove compartment and put it in the glove compartment. That was his testimony from the stand about how the Xanax got in the system, because he was prescribed methadone and diazepam, but he was not prescribed Xanax.
Well, now, can if you're on a prescription drug that makes you crazy, that can be used. I mean, you're not supposed to drive, right?
And a person can drive under the influence of prescription drugs so long as they're not rendered less safe to drive. But in the case of all these central nervous system depressants, which each one of these is, methadone is a central nervous system depressant, diazepam is, nordiazepam is, alprazolam is, and alcohol is, as we all know. When you combine the things, they have a multiplying effect. It's not just 1 + 1 or 2 + 2 = 4. It's like 2 + 2 = 5 or 7. They get the effects on the central nervous system, memory, coordination, judgment are
Reaction
compounded.
time.
Reaction time, all those things are compounded. And it is my opinion that Mr. Dixon simply blacked out on the road and veered off into the oncoming lane of traffic. Because when he was questioned by the Georgia State Patrol at the scene, who did a great job in the case in reconstructing the scene and investigating, he simply said, "I don't know what happened." When they went to serve the search warrant on him and get his blood, he was eating a popsicle and watching Andy Griffith. Apparently with no regard for what the lives he had taken.
All right, so what was the outcome?
The defense was also that they had a defense expert who testified that Mr. Dixon, because of his history of taking methadone and diazepam, would not have been under the influence of these drugs to the point that he was impaired. We had a rebuttal expert who testified that, in his opinion, he absolutely would have been impaired, would have been a less safe driver, and of course, the .083 is per se over the limit in Georgia for DUI. He was charged with multiple counts of homicide by vehicle, as well as serious injury by vehicle. The jury found him guilty of all 12 counts in the indictment, and the judge sentenced him to 50 years in prison.
How many?
50 years in prison.
When's he eligible for parole?
Parole eligibility on a case like this, I believe he'll be eligible technically in 7, but that's up to the parole board, and we're going to make sure that they know our feelings on at what point they should consider Mr. Dixon for parole.
All right, it's a good time to take a break. We are talking with Parks White. He's the district attorney for our area, and we'll be right back. Stay with us. We'll be back with more.